In Kumasi, Ghana, 22-year-old Lerato spent her nights in the small kitchen behind her parents' house, experimenting with spices and flavors. While everyone else slept, she mixed coconut milk with chili, grilled plantains, and scribbled recipe ideas in her worn-out notebook. She dreamed of opening her own restaurant one day, a place filled with warmth, laughter, and the smell of good food. But in her family's eyes, cooking wasn't a dream. It was a waste of time. Her father would shake his head every time he saw her chopping onions. "Cooking won't feed anyone in this house," he'd say, his voice sharp with disappointment. Her mother wasn't any kinder. She'd always point at Lerato's older sister, Thando, a successful lawyer in Accra. "Look at your sister," she'd say. "She's making the family proud. Why can't you be more like her?" Lerato tried to explain that food made her feel alive, that every dish she created felt like a story waiting to be told. But her father refused to listen. One evening, after another argument, he slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "If you think food will make you rich, then go feed yourself out there." The words cut deep. With tears in her eyes, Lerato packed a small suitcase, just a few clothes, her notebook, and her favorite wooden spoon. As she stepped out into the night, her heart was heavy, but her spirit burned quietly inside her. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing: she would never give up on her dream. Life in Accra was nothing like Lerato imagined. The city was loud, hot, and fast. She rented a tiny single room with cracked walls and a flickering bulb that buzzed all. There was barely enough space for her thin mattress, a small stove, and her notebook filled with recipes. Most nights, she ate instant noodles or plain rice with salt, what she jokingly called her five-star meal. Still, she told herself it was just the beginning. To survive, Lerato got a job washing dishes at a roadside cafe near the main market. The pay was small, but she didn't complain. Every morning, she stood at the sink, her hands wrinkled from soap and water, watching the cafe's chef toss spices into sizzling pans. The smell of fried fish, ginger, and garlic filled the air. Even though she was just the dishwasher, Lerato studied everything: how the chef handled the heat, how customers smiled when the food hit their table. When the cafe closed late at night, she stayed behind to clean, humming to herself and sketching new recipes on scraps of paper. Her dream felt far away, but she couldn't stop imagining the flavors she wanted to create. One night, the cafe owner, a cheerful woman everyone called Mama Efua, walked in and caught her doodling dishes on the back of an old receipt. "Yai, girl, what are you drawing there?" she asked with a teasing smile. Lerato froze, embarrassed, but Mama Efua took the paper from her hands and looked closer. "These look better than what I serve," she said, laughing. "You know how to cook, or you just draw food?" Lerato hesitated, then said softly, "I can cook. I just haven't had a chance to prove it." The next day, Mama Efua decided to give her that chance. "All right, my dear, make one meal. If the customers like it, we'll see." Lerato's heart raced. She borrowed a few ingredients: coconut milk, fresh chicken, chili, and a little ginger. She cooked with trembling hands, but poured every bit of her love and memory into the pot. When the stew started bubbling, the air filled with a sweet, spicy aroma that made even the chef peek over in surprise. They served her spiced coconut chicken stew to a customer. Then another, and another. Within an hour, every plate was empty. People asked, "Who made this?" "We want more." Mama Efua looked at Lerato with pride in her eye. "Girl, you've got magic in those hands," she said. Lerato smiled for the first time in weeks, a real smile. For the first time since leaving home, she felt seen. She wasn't just the girl who washed dishes anymore. She was Lerato, the cook who made people remember what joy tasted like. Within a week, everyone in the neighborhood was talking about the new stew at Mama Efua's cafe. Taxi drivers, shopkeepers, students. Everyone wanted to taste that new girl's food. Some didn't even know her name yet. They just called her the Coconut Stew Girl. Every morning, when Lerato arrived at work, there was already a small crowd waiting outside. The cafe had never been that busy before. Mama Efua couldn't stop smiling. "Yai, Lerato, you've turned my small cafe into a gold mine," she said, half joking, half serious. One afternoon, after another sold-out day, Mama Efua wiped her hands on her apron and said, "You know what, my dear? You deserve your own space. I'll give you that corner over there. It's small, but it's yours." Lerato's heart swelled. It wasn't much, just a wooden table and a single stove near the window. But to her, it felt like the start of something big. She named the little space Lerato's corner and began serving her own dishes. Spiced coconut stew, roasted plantain with pepper sauce, and smoky jollof with a twist of lemon. The customers loved how different her food tasted. Some said it reminded them of home. Others said it tasted like something brand new. Every night after closing, Lerato would count her small earnings and tuck a few sadies into an old biscuit tin. It wasn't much, but she saved a little every day. On the front page of her recipe notebook, she wrote her dream name in big letters, the Ember Table. She said it out loud sometimes, just to feel how it rolled off her tongue. "One day, that'll be my restaurant," she whispered to herself. Life was still hard. She still slept on the floor of her tiny room, using her folded clothes as a pillow. Some nights, the noise from the street kept her awake, and the hunger in her belly reminded her she wasn't there yet. But for the first time, she didn't feel lost. She had something that money couldn't buy: purpose. On weekends, children would peek through the cafe window to watch her cook, amazed by how she moved around the small stove like it was a grand kitchen. Sometimes she'd smile at them and let them taste a spoonful of sauce. "Don't tell your mother I spoiled your appetite," she'd say, laughing. As the days passed, Lorado realized something important. She didn't need a fancy kitchen or a big restaurant to make people happy. She just needed her passion, her flavors, and her belief that even small beginnings could lead to something beautiful. Standing in that little cafe corner, with the smell of ginger and coconut filling the air, Lorado felt rich for the first time. Not in money, but in purpose, hope, and heart. 2 years passed faster than Lorado could believe. What started as one corner in Mama Efua's cafe had grown into something bigger than she ever imagined. With the money she'd saved, and a little extra that Mama Efua lent her, she finally rented her own small restaurant space in a quiet street in Accra. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. 6 tables, 1 stove, and a big dream. Lorado spent weeks fixing the place up with her own hand. She painted the walls in shades of orange and gold, the colors of warmth and fire. She wanted anyone who walked in to feel the same comfort she felt when cooking. The smell of garlic, coconut, and ginger filled the air long before the doors opened. Neighbors walking by would stop and sniff, asking, "What's cooking in there?" When she finally opened, she called it the Ember Table, the name she had written in her notebook years before. The first few days were quiet, but Lorado didn't mind. She knew how to wait. Slowly, people began to notice her food. Young professionals stopped by during lunch breaks. Students came after class, drawn by the smell. A few tourists found her spot on local food map. Everyone who tasted her dishes said the same thing. There was something special in her cooking, something that felt like home and adventure all at once. Lorado worked nonstop. She cooked, served, cleaned, and smiled through the exhaustion. Some nights, she barely had time to eat. But when she saw customers laughing over bowls of her spiced coconut stew, she felt alive. This was her dream in motion, small but real. One evening, a young woman walked in with a camera and notebook. She introduced herself as a food blogger. "I've heard rumors about your stew," she said with a grin. Lorado laughed and served her a plate, trying not to seem nervous. The woman took one bite, then another, then looked up with wide eyes. "This," she said softly, "is unforgettable." The next morning, Lorado woke up to her phone buzzing nonstop. The blogger had posted about her restaurant, photos, videos, and a story titled, "The Woman Who Cooked Her Way Out of Nothing." The post exploded online. Within hours, thousands of people were sharing it. New customers flooded in, lining up outside before she even opened. Influencers tagged her food, travel bloggers showed up with cameras, and people from across the city came just to taste her stew. That night, after the rush finally ended, Lorado sat alone in the restaurant, surrounded by the smell of food and the sound of her heart beating with pride. She pulled out her old, grease-stained notebook and flipped through its pages, the same one she had carried when she left home. She smiled and whispered to herself, "They said I wouldn't make it." Then she closed the book, looked around her glowing restaurant, and thought, "But I did." It was only a matter of time before word reached her family. Lorado's restaurant, the Ember Table, had become one of the most talked-about spots in Accra. Every day, photos of her food filled social media. Bright plates of coconut stew, grilled tilapia, and sweet plantain chips. Her story had inspired many. The girl who was once kicked out of her home now owned one of the city's most loved restaurants. One warm afternoon, as Lorado was tasting a new sauce in the kitchen, a familiar voice called her name. She turned and froze. Standing at the entrance was Thando, her older sister, dressed in a sharp suit, heels clicking against the tiled floor. She looked exactly how Lorado remembered, confident, polished, and always in control. "Lorado, this place is yours?" Thando asked, her eyes scanning the restaurant. The orange walls, the smell of spices, the laughter of customers, it didn't match the sister she had once pitied. "Yes," Lorado said, wiping her hands on her apron. "All mine." Thando gave a small, practiced smile. "It's impressive," she said, looking around as if she didn't want to admit it. "Mom and Dad have been hearing about your success. They'd like to see you. They're proud now." Lorado paused, her spoon still in her hand. She let out a quiet laugh, not bitter, just tired. "Proud now," she said softly. "Were they proud when they threw me out with one suitcase and told me cooking wouldn't feed anyone?" Thando's face stiffened. "You're being dramatic, Lorado. We all struggled in our own ways. You're not the only one who's had it hard." Lorado looked at her sister, The same sister who once rolled her eyes at her kitchen dream. The same sister who never called when she was sleeping on the floor of her one-room apartment. Now she stood there, acting like family had always mattered. "This isn't about family, is it?" Lorado said quietly. "You're here because now it benefits you to be." Thando frowned, pretending not to understand. "Don't be like that. We just want to reconnect." But her voice gave her away, careful, measured, strategic. Lorado smiled, a small, knowing smile. "I'm glad you came," she said finally, her tone calm but firm. "Tell Mom and Dad I wish them well. But I'm not the same girl who left home crying. I found my own family here." Thando looked like she wanted to say something more, but couldn't find the words. She just nodded awkwardly and left, her perfume lingering in the air. Lorado watched her go, then turned back to her kitchen. The smell of garlic and coconut filled the room again. She picked up her spoon, tasted her sauce, and whispered to herself, This is where I belong." A week after Thando's visit, Lorado got a call that made her heart skip. It was her mother. Her voice was softer than Lorado remembered. "Your father and I would like to come by for dinner," she said. "We've heard so much about your restaurant." Lorado hesitated. For a moment, she wanted to say no, to remind her mother of the night they told her to leave. But something inside her said, let them come. So she agreed. That Friday evening, her parents walked into the Ember table dressed in their best clothes, like honored guests. Her father's eyes swept over the place. The warm orange walls, the wooden tables, the hum of happy customers. He nodded slowly. "This is nice," he said, pretending it was no big deal. Lorado smiled politely. "Thank you," she replied, even though his casual tone stung a little. They sat at a table by the window, where the evening light made everything glow. Lorado brought out her best dishes, coconut chicken stew, plantain chips, and grilled tilapia. Her parents ate quietly at first, surprised by how good everything tasted. Her father even chuckled between bites. "You really learned how to cook," he said. "I always told you had potential." Lorado nearly laughed out loud. "That's not what you said when you kicked me out," she thought. But she kept her calm and simply said, "I'm glad you like it." Dessert came, sweet mango pudding with coconut cream, and that's when her mother finally spoke. "You know, your sister's law firm hosts big corporate events," she began, smiling the kind of smile that meant trouble. "They've been looking for a restaurant partner. It could really help you grow, Lorado. Imagine your food at those events. Such great exposure." Lorado stirred her drink and nodded slowly, pretending to think it over. But she knew exactly what was happening. They weren't there because they missed her. They were there because she had finally become someone they could use. She looked at her parents, her father acting proud like he'd always believed in her, her mother already planning how to turn her success into theirs. For a moment, she felt that old ache in her chest, the one from the night she left home. But this time, she didn't feel small. She felt in control. "That sounds interesting," she said with a calm smile. "I'll think about it." Her mother beamed, already assuming Lorado would say yes. But Lorado knew her answer was no. She had built everything with her own two hands, without their help, without their approval. She didn't need to tie her hard-earned freedom to their expectations again. As they left, her father patted her shoulder. "We're proud of you," he said. When the door closed behind them, Lorado exhaled deeply. She looked around her restaurant, her dream made real, and whispered to herself, "I did this on my own. And that's enough." A few weeks after that dinner, Thando called Lorado again. Her tone was extra sweet this time, the kind of voice she used when she wanted something. "Lorado," she said, "my firm is hosting an important event next weekend. Big investors, media, everyone. We need the best catering, and I immediately thought of you. This could be amazing exposure for your restaurant." Lorado hesitated. She still didn't fully trust her sister, but the opportunity sounded good. More eyes on the Ember table meant more business. So she agreed. "All right," she said. "I'll do it, but I'm bringing my own team." In the days leading up to the event, Lorado planned every detail, the menu, the flavors, the setup. She wanted everything to be perfect. Coconut chicken skewers, smoky jollof balls, spicy shrimp cups, elegant but bold, just like her brand. She spent sleepless nights prepping, proud to finally share her food with a bigger crowd. When the day came, Lorado and her small team arrived early to set up. The venue was grand, chandeliers, white linens, the smell of expensive perfume in the air. Her food table looked beautiful, glowing under the lights. But as guests started to arrive, something felt off. She overheard her father speaking to a group of investors near the stage. "Yes," he was saying proudly, "our family runs a food business now. Lorado here manages it for us." Lorado froze. Her chest tightened as she heard her mother add, "We always knew she had a gift. It's a proud family project." Guests nodded, smiling, as if the story made perfect sense. Lorado stood there, holding a tray, her hands trembling. Her family had done it again. They had erased her story, the struggle, the pain, the nights she went hungry, and turned her hard work into their success. The humiliation burned deep. People were congratulating her parents, not her. Thando stepped up to the microphone to welcome everyone, flashing her perfect smile. "We're so happy to have our family's restaurant catering tonight's event," she said. "Please enjoy the food. It's our pride and joy." That was it. Lorado couldn't stay silent anymore. She walked toward the stage, heart pounding but steps steady. Thando's smile faltered when she saw her coming. Lorado reached for the microphone. "Just to be clear," she said, her voice calm but firm. The room went quiet instantly. "I was kicked out by this family with nothing but a suitcase and a notebook. They didn't believe in me then, and they didn't build this. The Ember table isn't theirs. It's mine." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras turned toward her. Thando looked frozen, her parents pale with shock. But Lorado stood tall, the light from the chandelier glinting off her apron. She handed back the microphone, smiled politely, and walked off the stage. The room buzzed with whispers and flashing cameras. And deep down, Lorado knew she'd just taken back her story in front of everyone who needed to hear it. By the next morning, Lorado's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, she thought it was just messages from friends, but then she saw it. A video of her speech from the event was everywhere. Someone had recorded the whole thing, her walking up to the stage, taking the mic, and calling out her family in front of everyone. The caption read, "The woman who fed herself from scratch." Within hours, the video went viral. Thousands of people were sharing it, cheering her bravery. Comments poured in. "This woman is fire. Respect to Lorado for standing up for herself. This is what self-made looks like." News blogs picked it up, local radio stations talked about it, and even TV shows mentioned her name. By noon, people were lining up outside the Ember table. The restaurant that usually opened at 11 had a crowd waiting by 10. Some came to taste her famous coconut chicken stew. Others came just to meet her, the woman who had the courage to speak her truth. Lorado barely had time to breathe, but she didn't care. Every plate she served felt like another small victory. Meanwhile, back at home, her family's phones wouldn't stop ringing. Friends, co-workers, and neighbors were all asking questions. "Is it true? Why did you lie?" Thando's law firm faced public embarrassment for claiming credit for a business they didn't own. Their firm's social media pages filled with angry comments, and clients began to distance themselves. For once, the story wasn't about Lorado being the outcast. It was about her being unstoppable. In the middle of all the noise, Lorado received dozens of emails from investors and entrepreneurs who wanted to partner with. Some offered to fund her next restaurant. Others wanted to help her start a franchise. It was overwhelming but exciting. She took her time, choosing the people who respected her story and shared her vision. A few months later, Lorado opened her second restaurant, this time in Cape Town, under a new name, the Ember Group. It was modern, bright, and filled with the same warmth that had carried her from her tiny cafe corner. She decorated the walls with photos from her journey, from washing dishes at Mama Efua's cafe to standing proudly in her own kitchen. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Strangers would stop her in airports or markets, saying, "You're the woman who fed herself from scratch, right?" She would smile and nod, humbled but proud. Lorado had become more than a chef. She was a symbol of strength, of courage, of what happens when you believe in yourself even when no one else does. And every night, when the restaurant lights dimmed and the last customer left, she would look around her growing empire and think, "This flame, my flame, will never go out." A few months after her viral rise, Lorado sat in her new office, reviewing designs for her third restaurant. Life had changed so fast. Just a few years ago, she was washing dishes for coins. Now, she had employees, investors, and a growing brand people trusted. Still, she stayed grounded, always reminding herself where she came from. That afternoon, her assistant knocked softly on the door. "Madam Lorado," she said, "there are two people here asking to see you. They say they're your parents." Lorado froze for a moment. She hadn't seen them since the night they came to her restaurant months ago. She stood up slowly, her heart tightening in her chest. "Let them in," she said quietly. When her parents walked in, they looked different, smaller somehow. The proud posture her father once carried was gone. Her mother's eyes were red and tired. They didn't look like the people who had thrown her out. They looked like people who had been defeated by life. Her father cleared his throat, avoiding her eyes. "Lorado," he started, We've had a hard time. The shop closed down. Sales dropped. We couldn't keep up with rent." Her mother's voice broke as she added, "And Thando's firm isn't doing well either. Clients left after everything that happened. We're trying to find our footing, but it's been impossible." Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "Can we stay with you for a while? Just until we get back on our feet." The room went silent. Lorado looked at them, the same people who had once told her cooking was a waste of time, who had shut their door on her when she needed them most. Part of her wanted to walk away, to remind them of every word that had cut her back then. But another part of her, the part that had learned to forgive without forgetting, couldn't ignore the pain in her mother's trembling voice. She took a deep breath. When I needed you, she said softly, you turned me away. I remember standing in the street that night, with nothing but my suitcase. That kind of pain doesn't disappear easily. Her parents lowered their heads, ashamed. Lorato paused, then continued, her tone gentler. But I also know how it feels to have nothing, and I won't let anyone else feel that if I can help it. I'll find a place for you to stay. Her mother began to cry quietly, whispering, thank you, my child. Lorato arranged for them to live in a small apartment above one of her restaurants. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and comfortable, a safe space, not a gift of pride but of mercy. That night, as she locked up her office, Lorato looked out over the city lights and thought about how life had come full circle. Her family once left her to survive on her own. Now she was the one keeping them afloat. But she didn't feel victorious or bitter. She just felt free. The ocean shimmered under the evening sun as waves crashed gently against the rocks below. Inside her newest restaurant, the Ember Shore, Lorato stood by the window, taking it all in. The soft orange glow from the walls reflected the sunset, the same colors she had painted by hand in her very first place. Now the walls carried framed photos of her journey, her small cafe corner in Accra, her first handwritten menu, the night the Ember table opened. Each picture told a piece of her story. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Tourists, locals, and food lovers filled every table, enjoying dishes that once existed only in her notebook. The air smelled of roasted garlic, coconut, and the ocean breeze. Lorato looked around with quiet pride, not the loud kind that demanded attention, but the kind that came from knowing she had built something real. Just then, the door opened, and an old familiar voice called out, "You did it, child." Lorato turned to see Mama Efua, older now but still wearing that same warm smile. Her heart swelled. She walked over and hugged her tightly. "No, Mama," she said softly. "We did it. You were the first to believe in me." Mama Efua laughed, eyes glistening. "And look at you now, feeding the whole world." As they stood there, Lorato's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, a message from Thando. "You've become everything we couldn't." Lorato stared at the words for a moment, then smiled gently. She put the phone face down, wiped her hands on her apron, and turned toward the kitchen. The noise of the dining room faded as she stepped back behind the counter, surrounded by sizzling pans and the smell of home. The sound, the heat, the creation, this was where she truly belonged.